I'm Emma Lubitsch, and you're watching CAN TV. We're here today with Kelly Wendt from RefugeeOne, the largest refugee resettlement organization in Illinois. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Give us a little bit of background on the work that RefugeeOne does.
Absolutely. So as you said, RefugeeOne is the largest full-service resettlement agency in Chicago. Since 1982, we've welcomed more than 18,000 refugees from nearly every major world conflict. And we welcome refugees from the moment they arrive at O'Hare. And we go on to provide a continuum of services that includes English language training, job readiness services, K-12 programming, and also wellness services that focuses on processing the trauma they've experienced. RefugeeOne really focuses on providing holistic programming that helps every member of the family and just really sets refugees on a path to have a flourishing life here in the U.S.
So refugee communities have been particularly hard hit by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what does that look like on the ground in the community that you serve?
So, refugees are already vulnerable as they start their lives here in Chicago. Many families live paycheck to paycheck and work in industries hardest hit by COVID-19, like hospitality, food service, airports, things like that. We know our refugee neighbors and clients are incredibly resilient because of the trauma they've already experienced. But with COVID-19, they're facing a great deal of uncertainty as well. Some refugees have been laid off because they work in industries like airport and hospitality, but others work in essential jobs, which comes with its own sets of anxieties and worries. We've seen an uptick in anxiety for clients who participate in our wellness services due to concerns of COVID-19, and we're really focusing on the impact that COVID-19 has had on the mental health of our clients, and that's something that we're really focusing on right now. I think RefugeeOne also is important for providing important information to clients. Refugees really rely on agencies like us to relay accurate information because they face a language barrier. This means that refugees aren't often getting information from traditional media outlets. So there's a delay in receiving really important information, and that's a big reason why resettlement agencies and places like mutual aid societies are really important.
And so are there any personal stories that you can share with us?
Definitely. One of our clients, her name is Lalia, and she was pregnant when RefugeeOne welcomed her back in 2016. Her husband, Bob, had to wait for clearance to join her. So he was in a Tanzanian refugee camp where their family actually lived for more than 20 years. After 4 years of separation since 2016, we helped reunite them at O'Hare this last February. And it was such a joyful reunion where Bob got to meet his son for the first time, Peter Bob. And they were really looking forward to building their lives together, after being reunited here in the US. But of course, then COVID-19 hit and they're facing a lot of new challenges. And like many refugees, as I mentioned, Lalia is still working on the front lines. She was fortunate to be able to keep the job that we helped her find at the self-help home, where she cares for elderly Chicagoans. But she recently found out she's expecting their second child. And so there's just a lot of added anxiety about exposure going to and from work on her commute and just being exposed to the virus at work. So recently arrived refugees like Bob don't qualify for the $1,200 cash payments from the stimulus package. And since he had just arrived in February and is still learning English at RefugeeOne, he hadn't found a job yet and didn't qualify for unemployment. So fortunately, we were able to get him a job at the self-help home working alongside his wife, Lalia. But many families like theirs are facing challenges right now. Unemployment, layoffs, loss of wages. And as a country, we've promised these families to support them in achieving self-reliance. And now's a time where we really can't turn our back on them.
And so talk about the stimulus money, because I think that there is a lot of confusion about who receives it. So within your community, are people eligible for that stimulus money, the federal stimulus money, and then also the statewide?
It's a little bit of a confusing process, but unfortunately, the most recently arrived refugees were ineligible to receive the stimulus checks through the CARES Act. because of their date of arrival. They weren't here long enough due to residency requirements. And they also don't qualify for unemployment or the added unemployment pandemic benefit because they weren't here long enough to work, or they didn't work for long enough to qualify. So these folks are really falling through the cracks of relief efforts, and we're, as an agency, collaborating in national and local advocacy efforts to ensure that refugees, regardless of arrival date, are included in the next federal relief package.
Right. And so housing insecurity is a big issue in the refugee community typically. There have been a moratorium on eviction since the pandemic began, but now the moratorium is coming to an end. Pritzker yesterday extended it until August 22nd. So how do you see that impacting your clients when those moratoriums do end?
Yeah, so this is definitely something we're keeping our eyes on. One of RefugeeOne's top priorities is making sure that refugees don't fall victim to homelessness. And we do everything we can to help refugees, from finding employment to assisting with other forms of benefits like housing assistance through our national partners, CWS and LIRS, and also providing financial assistance if needed. So this is definitely something that we are keeping our eyes on and know that this will impact our clients.
Okay. And so, I mean, what do you need as an organization from federal and local officials to support the community?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we're really advocating that the next stimulus package extends cash payments to refugees, including those most recently arrived, since they were unfortunately left out of the last stimulus package. I think something that's important to remember is that refugees don't come to the US with traditional support systems that other people have. So it's really critical that local and state governments provide resources and benefits that help support refugees. Most come to the US with nothing and are just a couple of paychecks away from not being able to provide for their families. So social safety nets are incredibly important. And yeah, we're, as an agency, are doing everything we can to help support them. And we hope that local and federal officials do as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so if people are looking for resources, are there places that you can point people?
Yeah, so a cool thing that RefugeeOne is doing is that we have a sewing studio that teaches refugee women sewing skills. And recently, we have had over a dozen refugee women begin making masks for sale for both healthcare workers and for sale to the public. So if people are interested in supporting that effort, they can go to refugeeone.com/masks.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for talking with us today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely.